We've lost to a large extent the male role model or the mentor. The male role model has been replaced a lot by the female role model. There is a necessity for men to be shown by other men how to be good men.
You take on so much of a burden because you want to be the nice guy, because you want to be everybody's friend. Now you're putting yourself in this deep, dark hole that you yourself created because you didn't know when to say no. You didn't know when to step up for yourself.
Growing up, we didn't think white people had these kind of problems. We didn't think they had issues like, you see how much we are so different, but yet so much alike. That this broadcast here can share a light that men can talk to each other, not at each other, man.
If you have a dream, if you have a vision, you follow that. Because if you don't, it's going to haunt you.
What I've seen in doing this podcast is there's been a lot of questions regarding overall men's mental health, how big fitness applies to our life, how big finances apply to our life. And it can be very difficult to only listen to one source and expect that you're going to have all the information. So I'm very excited to have a couple of former guests on the show who come from different generations, different parts of the country. The overall goal being that you as an audience member or as a listener can take some of the information that both me and them are talking about and use it to apply towards your life. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome back Nick Palladino-King and Zuberi Issa.
Right.
Back to the show.
Right.
Nick is the owner of Tribe Fitness in San Francisco, and he's very big into the men's mental health. And Zuberi, best way I can tell you is that he's old school. He's been around. He's seen things that a lot of us would only have read about in the history books, but he's seen it firsthand growing up in Mississippi, and he's seen things that none of us can imagine. And for him to be able to power through all that, he's got a lot of great life lessons that he can teach the rest of us. So Zuberi, thank you for coming on again.
No problem.
So I wanted to start this one out by having you guys just explain a little bit about your background so the audience who hasn't seen your last episode can get an understanding, and then we'll get right into it about some of the things that I want to talk about.
Well, as I said in the last podcast, I was born in Macomb, Mississippi, and grew up, went to Higgins High School, went to college, Mississippi Valley State. Went through a lot of the civil rights movement, seen a lot of things. Growing up, and was kind of confused about the human aspect of people getting along. So growing up through that with my mom was a civil rights pilot, and a lot of people had come to Macomb, young people from all over the country, to come down and to let Mississippi know that there are two Americas, one black, one white. Mm-hmm. I didn't see that at the time. The only thing I see is the haves and the have-nots. One side of the track had all of the swimming pools and all the things that they needed to have their kids to go through a world. We didn't have that on our side of the challenge. But was it part of something we wanted to do? Yeah, we wanted to have the same things, but it just wasn't the status quo because of the Jim Crow system. So I came up through that. But I had no anger, resentment, and anything. But there was a lot of things that were going on, a lot of bombings, church bombings, house bombings. But I could say, you know, I was all right. I had a mom. I had a mom that had a family that raised us in a way to show love and compassion, and to do one of two things: live, walk like you talk, and show the world about love and compassion. Now, when I grew up further, that was harder to do after coming out of college.
And I'm sure we're going to tackle a lot about what you talked about there and how it applies to today's world. And then Nick, give a quick spiel again for the audience about who you are and what you grew up with.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on, Mike. And I like how I got my Niners hat on. You got the Raiders hat. A little battle of the Bay today.
We'll do that, even though your team's still playing and mine's long been out. But we got a new coach, so I'm excited about that.
If my voice is a little scratchy, I was at the game last night, cheered. So I don't really know where to start. I feel like my story kind of doesn't matter to some extent of where I've been and where I come from. I think what's more important is now what I'm focused on and what my mission is as a man in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's really for me to be a service, you know, to show up in the world and to serve people and help them grow and help them see things differently. And that's really what drives me to be on shows like this, to do the work I do with health, with wellness, with spirituality, with coaching, specifically in the men's world, like we talked about last time. Mm-hmm. And I'm just excited to talk about some things that matter, get in there and get deep and not be afraid to share what we think. And I know, Mike, we were talking before that there's a hesitancy to talk about things, especially when it comes to men's health. And some of the best and the most fun and the deep and the scariest work I've done to date is running men's groups.
Yeah.
You know, and getting 10 guys together in a room and standing in a circle and talking to each other and challenging each other and supporting each other too in a very positive way. And that's how we can grow. So I'm just excited to talk about that.
There we
excited
go.
to dive in, and we'll just see where it goes from here.
Well, let's get right into it. We live in a day and age where, let's just call it what it is. There's certain things that as guys, we just can't talk about in public because either it's toxic masculinity. We're supposed to keep our thoughts in check. We have to go out there and perform. And I definitely get that sense because, you know, I have a job out in the public sector and you have to go in and perform. Things happen. You have to process it and move on. And in today's day and age, it's difficult because with technology, social media, and everybody working from home, especially more recently in the last couple of years, it can be very difficult to really figure out how to process certain things because you don't have a lot of real life experience and seeing it in real life. So Zuberi, I'm going to start with you and ask you this. What do you think is the problem from what you've seen, or the biggest outlier with what's going on with a lot of men's health, wellness out there in the world today?
It's hard to say, but, you know, I kind of think we've been dealing some really harsh cards because men are not supposed to show emotions. And you know, like, we ain't supposed to cry. The things that I've seen is that I've seen a lot of older brothers like myself are beginning to really open up about, man, I got some challenges, I got some problems, man, but I don't, if I tell people my problems, man, and they might laugh at me, I don't know how to reach out to people when I need some help. And I see these younger brothers who are out here, white or black. I mean, they're reaching out. They are really seeking for some help. But when you got close to about 600,000 African American men in prison, and what's going on about that? I mean, when I was coming up, man, we had male teachers, and they handed down to us some of the working that we needed to do in a society, to make it in this society, regardless of whatever you got to do it. What's frightened me more than anything else, when I say frightened, I'm not talking about physical fright. What I'm saying that I can't walk up to young men and talk to them, hey man, how you doing, like I did in the old days. I can't do that because I don't know what they got in their pocket. I don't know what the fentanyl, I don't know what's going on. So what happened, I have to watch my P's and Q's on even some older brothers might not just want to hear it because, as I said to you once before, I mean, the worst thing you can tell anybody is the truth. If you can look them in the eyes and tell them the truth, that some of them might not be ready for it, and you don't know what's getting ready to come back. So you have to stay on guard about, hey man, I'm just trying to work with you, but I didn't ask you to work with me. Okay, then I had to learn how to just back off. If you want to be a friend of mine, I'm very cautious on who I call a friend. So I'm very leery about on who I talk to and how I approach them about the subject, because a lot of them might not want the subject that I want to handle. Mm-hmm. And that's where I am.
So what has been some of the things that you see, Nick, in a lot of these men's groups? Is there one overall theme that says this is something that we seem to not be able to get through, or this pressure that everybody sees? Is there a common theme?
I mean, I think there's a lot of themes out there, and Zuberi, you just touched on one. Is one where we talked about this last time, Mike, is we've lost to a large extent the male role model or the mentor, which is, for a lot of us, it may be the last time we had that was in high school with a coach. But after that, it's like you kind of go out into the world and we lose these positive role models, these positive men in our lives that show us, hey, here's what it's like to be an elder. Here's what it's like to impart some wisdom. Here's what it's like to share, support, and challenge. And in a way, I think the male role model has been replaced a lot by the female role model. And I'm not saying that's bad, but there is a necessity for men to be shown by other men how to be good men, and how to be confident men, and how to be men of purpose. So I think that's one of the main things we're missing now is that positive role model, that mentor. And I saw a sign the other day when I was walking in San Francisco, and the sign said, "Stop men." And I thought for a minute, and I said, well, what the fuck does that mean? First of all, like, what does that mean, stop men? Like, was white men, black men, Mexican men, like all men, gay men? I'm like, so we're going to make an entire species, an entire sex wrong? Is that what we're going to do? Because I'm going to tell you right now, that's not the way forward. When we start saying men are wrong, women are right, how do you think people are going to respond? That's not the way we're going to elevate the conversation. That's not the way we're going to get more men to engage. That's the way we're going to get more men to disengage and pull out and remove themselves. And you see that all the time with the kids you work with. So I think that's part of it is we got to stop making men wrong. We got to stop telling men that they're fucking up, and we got to start supporting men to say, hey, here's how you can be a man in a positive way. And also, it's okay to have conversations. It's okay to share with your friends. It's okay to open up. It's okay to be vulnerable. And I would say for women listening, it's okay for your men to be vulnerable. Like, and if they get a little too vulnerable, don't get uncomfortable with it. Because I've seen that too. It's like, oh, whoa. I don't want you to be that vulnerable.
Yeah, you asked for it, but then, wait a minute, where's the line at?
Hold on, where's my knight in shining armor? It's like, well, you can't have both. I can't be your knight in shining armor and be vulnerable. You got to let me be myself. So I think there's a lot of that going on, a lot of combination. And there's a lot of room for men to step up and be supported and be shown a way forward. You know, this is what we're doing in our conversations. This is what the three of us are doing in our lives. And I've got plenty of great friends that are doing this as well. But there's a need for it. It's important. We got to bring everyone up together.
Well, you brought up a good word that triggers a lot of dudes, and that's the word vulnerability. Because when we hear that word, it seems to mean, okay, I got to express all these emotions and feelings about, I got to cry about this, or my father died, so I'm supposed to act a certain way. That's how we interpret it. And then over time, you start realizing that maybe from the female point of view, it's less about being that emotional or more about saying, you know what, I got some things going on. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm dealing with. But here's my plan. Here's how I'm handling it. So I need you to understand that, respect it, and go with it. Because some of the feedback I've gotten is, at least if you say that, you're being vulnerable in the conversation, but you're also showing that you can handle yourself, that you're not looking for a handout per se from your female partner. You're looking for her to say, all right, here's what's going on. You want to know what's going on in my head? It's this. Mm-hmm. Here's why I have to deal with it a certain way. Here's what I have to do. So there's still that respect factor, but then they're also getting that vulnerability part. And I hear that not only with that word vulnerability, but, and I can't even think of the other words, where you tell guys to do a thing and we're so literal, we take it that way. Oh, you said climb the ladder to go up the roof. So I did it. Oh, you didn't tell me put this over here and put the lock on there. I just went up it because you said to do it. It's like, no, there's other steps. And it's one of the challenges that we have is to get through that and see, what are you really asking me? Because I'm not really sure from the words you're saying, here's how I interpret it. Have you seen that in your life growing up?
Yes,
Did you have that issue of vulnerability?
Yes, I have had that issue of vulnerability. Just sitting next to my brother right here now, just talking, right? Mm-hmm. I don't like to use an analogy of white and black. I don't, okay? That's only in America. You get ready to call somebody of a color in this country, it's white or either black. In Africa, people call it Africans. Mm-hmm. In British, they call it British. Only in America, they call it white or black, and that's how people identify. Now, what gets me is this: in 1960, sitting next to him like this, talking this kind of stuff, he and I both might be blown up before we got out of the studio. Man. I'm being honest with you, because number one,
real with it.
Because what happened is that when you're vulnerable, and my wall was set up and not to trust him because of his color, well, that was torn down when Gregory Peterson was going to University of Berkeley, and he came down to one of the Freedom Riders. Well, what happened was that our family were responsible for these white kids that was coming down. And I mentioned before, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schrenner. I mean, they came down through the South. Now, having a conversation like this at an open forum where we get out like that, I mean, people start looking for you. So what happens is that when Greg came to stay with us, and listen, you talking about vulnerability? This is the only white person that's ever been in our home that not only came in our home, but I had to sleep in the same bed with him. Now, I'm not afraid of the man, but I'm afraid of who he is. This is the only closeness that I've ever gotten to anybody white at arm to arm, number one, because of the Jim Crow system. Mm-hmm. Because if you in 1949, you're in South Africa, I mean, 1949 to 1985, it was against the law, interracial marriage or interracial anything there. That they just broke that law in 1985. So in the South, where we're having this conversation right now about real issues, men have real issues, and we have not had a platform to express these issues unless they're saying, well, you weak-minded. Mm-hmm. this kid played quarterback for USC. I mean, when he lost against Washington, he was crying. And I heard a coach say, well, he's talking about a big baby. He don't know what that kid went through. He went with his mom and started crying and everything. And to be honest with you, that coach for the NFL, talking about how weak he was, if I could have been by him, I would have punched him in his damn mouth. I would have. Because he don't know what this kid's going through. He don't know the vulnerability of this kid, what he had to come from. His mom had given him encouragement not to strike back. You don't know what it meant to, it says, benign neglect. You don't know what it is for people to come into your hometown, coming in your neighborhood, throwing bombs, and you can't throw bombs back or shoot back. That's vulnerability right there. When your mom says to your son, no, this is the house of God. And what happened, anybody coming in the house is very welcome. So I'm very adamant about sitting here having a conversation with you. First time we met. I have no problem in talking to men, and that's what we need to have, strong conversations about strong conversations. That's where I am.
So did you feel back in the day that if you would have done this, you would have been respected by either other men or maybe the women in your life?
I think they would have been petrified because, number one, how you going to step out to that? Man, you black. You can't sit next to this guy and be talking this way like him. You're going to get us all killed in the neighborhood, okay? Well, why you stepping out? Well, my heroes was Jim Brown. My hero was Dr. King. My hero was Malcolm X. Malcolm X and Dr. King, I was a cross between them. Malcolm talking the battle of the bullet, freedom for everybody, freedom for nobody. Dr. King says, listen, these are our brothers and my sister. We cannot hold anger and resentment against them because of what they do to us. So what happened is I was a cross between them, and I was young, and I understood both philosophies. Dr. King says, only when it's dark enough can I see the stars. And I see God working in this period of the 20th century, where I understand that now what he was talking about. I understand what Malcolm was talking about, because the propaganda of other countries is seeing. Other countries do not want to see he and I working together and saying we working for together of mankind. Mm-hmm. They don't want to see that. And that's why it's a lot of time it's hard for people to open up and talk about the real issues. And that's one reason you see a lot of football players, a lot of people post-traumatic stress disorder. What are you talking about, post-traumatic stress disorder? If I had post-traumatic stress disorder, I would have been nuts. But I got a lot of love for whoever I'm talking to.
No, I get you, man. No, it's real stuff there, because you could just see how it's sort of evolved, just whole talking about it, whereas back then you couldn't say nothing. Oh. Now it's a little more open to say it. That being said, like you were saying earlier, if you go too far into it, then that could have an opposite effect that you then have to deal with how people are trying to work through it. Yeah. But coming back to today's...
What's coming from me real quick, though, and obviously we have different experiences, and for me it's less about race. I don't come from that reality, right? Mm-hmm. But a similar experience I've had is in the spiritual world and in the emotional world of being a big, tall, strong man in a room predominantly filled with women, and me learning for the last 15 years to really go deep into my emotions and vulnerability and spirituality. And then people are going, you don't look like the type of person that's into that. You don't talk like it. You don't walk like it. You don't dress like it. And it's like, so I've felt a lot of kind of a similar feeling of not belonging, and a similar feeling of people being like, I don't understand what's your deal, or you were like, and it's just, I think we all got to be who we are at the end of the day, right? And be open to then that word vulnerability is just to share and say, hey, here's what I'm feeling, and it's to say, hey, like I'm uncomfortable. Hey, I know what it feels like in my own lens to not fit in, mm-hmm. And we're all gonna have different experiences. We're all gonna have different realities, and none of us are gonna have the same thing. But I think we can sit with each other and understand each other, mm-hmm. and then we can learn and grow and be like, hey, your experience is different. I can learn from that. My experience is different. Someone else can learn from that. If we can get to those places, it's like then there is no wall between us, right? It's like we're just here to help each other and grow each other. Right. And I'm even thinking of my father a lot. He's from the East Coast, and he's around your age, and a lot of what he's always talked to me about was just breaking down walls between men, and breaking down walls through sports, breaking down walls through camaraderie, and seeing people as people.
Right.
And when you can do that, there's so much greatness in everyone. There's so much greatness in everyone when you can do that.
Yeah. I mean, that camaraderie thing is huge. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're losing a lot of it now because a lot of us work from home, or everything is done on a computer, or everything is done on your cell phone, Instagram. I'm really a big believer that for men specifically, we need to be out there bonding with other dudes, whether to accomplish a task either at work or to protect the family, the whole tribe. And if you go back really farther, it's say, yeah, all the dudes got together because they had to go out and kill the bison or the antelope to bring food back to the family and to the tribe so everybody could survive. I think that's still deep within us at certain levels. It's obviously changed because we're not worried about the saber-tooth tiger coming to our house and taking out our family. Now it's a different way of how do we allow our whole family to survive and proceed forward. And it's just changed so much in just the last 60 years of what's expected of us. And, back when you were growing up, Zubi, it was all about the nuclear family.
Right.
Talk about the expectation that you were given as a kid as to, hey, when you grow up, this is what you're supposed to do. Not so much about black versus white, but as a man, what were you supposed to do? What was expected of you, and what things you just had to deal with?
To be a teacher. I mean, I wanted to be a teacher, the teacher of students, teacher of men. And that's where, from Dr. King and all, I mean, we read, man, and they said, if you ever want to keep a black man stupid, give him a book because he won't read it, okay? So what happened is that I wanted to be educated, man, to understand. That's why as I spoke to you the last time, I was so grateful to come to California to understand. But being very vulnerable, the spirituality came out of it, too, for me to grow closer to Christ, for me. And what happened is, I can sit here and tell both of you, when we lived at 600 Bell Street up here, I mean, Jim Jones Church was right here on Gary and Fillmore, okay? I could have easily ended up in Jim Jones Church because I'm saying, well, look at this good white man talking about God. Mm-hmm. I was very vulnerable just to hear somebody's opinion and he's preaching the word. Okay, I could have ended up in that. But that's one reason I had to go to God. And I said, look, I need some help here. I hear the world coming around, the world's coming all crumbling down, white and black, everything's going on. I need some help here. And I had to reach out and get some help. And get some help of understanding. And understanding what? Understanding what my role is in the society, what my role is in this world.
So what would your parents have told you about, hey, when you get older, here's what's expected. You're supposed to be married. You're supposed to have a job. You're supposed to buy a house. Talk about that angle. What was told that you were supposed to do and you had to aim for?
After college, everything that was expected. To get married, have a family, and to teach. That's what was the expectation, because you want to raise up the neighborhood of kids that you were growing up who looked up to you, and you want to raise those kids to become teachers. And that's all I wanted to do, become a teacher. If I didn't come to California, I would still been a teacher to this day. And that's one reason I was working for the San Mateo High School District in the school district there with the children welfare. So my job was to go out and looking for at-risk kids to find out why they wasn't in college prep courses and stuff like that, because I'm about education. You know, a lot of these football players and everybody, they're making millions and millions of dollars, but can you read? Can you read your contract? Mm-hmm. Can you read what they're saying? Or why you have to get an agent to read what your contract says to you? You don't know what you're getting down there. I mean, I'll never forget a guy from Arkansas named Gary Anderson. And when the USFL was going in, and Lou Holt was his coach down there at the time. And then he sued the NFL, man, because he couldn't read or write. He couldn't even read his own contract, okay? They had a number of things. Like, so when you see a lot of these guys getting these contracts and millions and billions of dollars, ask them to read it if they can understand it. That's what I'm about, is understanding, reading what I'm saying and reading what I'm understanding now. When I got into the Bible, that's a whole nother area, because I'm still learning.
Well, let's talk about this then. So over here in the Bay Area, there's a lot of pressure to still live the old school way, which is you get married in your 20s, you have a family, you buy a home. And for the guy anyway, you get into that career that you're going to do for 40 years and you'll retire out of it. Your retirement, you get the gold watch, and that's the end of it. It's almost impossible to do that here nowadays because of the cost of living, the expectations. A lot of us, a lot of men nowadays, we're not hitting our stride until our 30s or even 40s in terms of how much money that we're making, what we really want. Did we get all that fun out of our system early on? And it kind of shows that maybe for a long time, we never really had that in our 20s back in the day. But in your generation, you guys were getting married 20, 25 years old, and you had to just go into it.
Right.
And here, people who may want to do that, they realize, wait a minute, I can't afford this $1.5 million home. because I need to make X amount of money.
I don't want to afford that.
Yeah. Or, you know, I'm supposed to have kids, but I'm also 25, and that seems kind of young. And is that, and I know, Nick, we were talking about that the last time. It's like, hey, I'm trying to build a business. You know, I have a wife. We're trying to build our own life, but this didn't come to me right away. There were some challenges that I had to go through. So from your point of view, Nick, what have been some of the biggest things that you've had to live up to try and achieve sort of that new American dream, but over here?
I mean, that's a good question, and fortunately, I'm lucky. But my parents never put pressure on me to be anybody, which is actually, and I tell them all the time. I go, that's the greatest gift you've ever given me and my brother.
Right.
Is that they never told us you need to do this in order to earn our love, and I tell them every time I see them, I'm like, I couldn't ask for anything more. I think the expectation though is that we're good people and that we have a high standard, right? So I've always tried to live up to that. I think a lot of that is what's been some of my own internal struggle, is leaving. When I was 25, I left that path that you were talking about, Mike, and I was on the path, and I was on it. It was hyperactive for me, and all I wanted to do was be rich and make money and have, you know, houses and cars. And I found myself at 25 going, I don't know if this is me, man. I don't know if this is what I'm here to do. I don't know if this is what I want to be spending my time with. So a large struggle I went through actually in my mid-20s, and it was almost like a quarter-life crisis is what I would call it, is I had an inflection point we talked about last time, and when I was mugged by 3 men, you know, that changed my life. And that shot me off in a different direction, because I'm going, this isn't worth it. If I would have died in the, you know, by being mugged, I remember saying my life wouldn't have been worth it. So I needed that experience to wake me up and shake me up. But then to go, okay, well, what do I want to do with myself now? And I remember when I left my corporate career, my friends, their parents, my family all went from Nick is kind of the gold standard of what we want to see in our son and our friends, to now like, this guy's dangerous. What's his deal? Why did he sell all his possessions? Why did he quit his corporate job? You know, why is he now living in other countries around the world? And it was like, I was finding myself. I was finding myself. It was like kind of like the hero's journey of going inward into yourself as a man and saying, okay, am I going to go for what I want, or am I going to go for what other people want for me or from me? And a lot of people choose to go to the latter. They choose to live the life that other people have set for them. And what I've learned as a man is like, if you have a dream, if you have a vision, you follow that. Because if you don't, it's going to haunt you, and it's going to keep coming after you. So that's been a huge challenge for me, was paving my own path and having faith that was the right thing for me to do. And I had so many chances and opportunities actually to go back. The company that I left at 25, at 30, called me out of the blue and wanted me to come back to them. And I was a minute away from taking that job and going back into that world. And I remember sitting there with myself again and being like, okay, you got away once. If you go back, is that what you want? And it would have been for more money, more security. The $1.5 million house for sure would have been in that package. And I've said, no, this is not it. I'm going to keep pushing forward towards my dreams and goals of being my own person, you know, and creating my own reality. And that's fucking hard. It's so hard. It's so hard to trust yourself. It's so hard to pave through and push through for your path that you see for yourself. But man, if you do that, if you use these positive aspects of being men, of having confidence in yourself, having faith, having the ability to continue to push forward and work through things, I look back now and I would go, man, I wouldn't trade that for anything. All the 15 years it took me to figure this out, to be my own person, to have a great marriage, to have a thriving business that helps people in the community. Like, so now I have all those things that I wanted. It just looks very, very different than what I expected in my mind.
Yeah.
Right. But now it's like, in this moment, can I appreciate it? And then can I start to share it and say, hey, I did it. I'm not special. You can do it. But now you got to know, what do you want to do? And then you got to take steps in action towards it. And this is anything we're talking about. Right. So yeah, major thing for me has been silencing my own judgments of myself, of who I'm supposed to be, and trusting in myself for who I know I am.
And Zubi, so a big thing that's come up in nowadays is the whole idea of men's mental health. There's a lot of questions about why men are deleting themselves, about pressures to live up to. And we live in a time that on paper, it's a lot safer than it was back when you were growing up. And you were dealing with church bombings. You're dealing with racism outright, with Jim Crow, segregation. Yet, from what you were telling me before, because there was structure, albeit as, you know, out of whack as it was, you felt safer. And because you did, you were able to sort of find your own life path. Now that we have more safety freedoms, whatever you want to call it nowadays, it seems to have created a bigger problem with, okay, now that there's not as much structure, a lot of dudes are like, well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to live up to the new expectations of society when, you know, I can barely afford to live? And, you know, the idea of, I want to say the easy way is to go back to the 1950s and say we need to go back to live that way. I think that time had its place. It's done with. We have to evolve. But if we still try to live like our parents and grandparents did with the way that the world is now, it just seems to be causing a lot of problems. So for your generation, Zubi, how would you, was mental health the same issue that it is today? And if it was, how were you guys able to prosper through that, given the fact that you were living in what we would call harsh conditions?
I don't even know what the word mental health was in those days. I didn't know what mental health, what does it mean? I mean,
we didn't even have that growing up, Mike.
Yeah,
I mean, really, that wasn't a word 15 years ago.
Yeah, mental health.
20 years ago.
Yeah. What does mental health mean? Because, you know, coming out of high school and all these bombings that are going on, you got a war in Vietnam that's going on. You are going through the draft lottery. My number was 346. I'm married, might get drafted and go to Vietnam. If there was any time I should have had mental health, that was it. I don't understand this day what the mental health issues are. I don't understand them. Do I think that the kids today could live then? That's too broad of a step for me to take. I just know that I have a foundation of select a lot of people around me that helped me in my generation to get to the point right now where they look at said mental health. I still scratch my head. So what kind of mental health issues do you have that I didn't have coming in the South? Those are real health issues. Those are life and death issues. So if you have a mental health issue, let's talk about the issue where you are. You're not succeeding like you wanted to. What you're doing, you want to do and you can't do. What's stopping you? So if those are mental health issues that was going on today, I couldn't process it then. We're just trying to stay alive then. So when people say, "Well, I got some mental health issues," what are you talking about? Help me here. I don't understand it.
And you still talk to high school kids, right? And is that what they're sort of telling you? Hey, I'm dealing with this, and it's kind of hard for you to relate to what's this about.
Yeah, it's what I do find out, there are a lot of men that was coming up in my generation now that I can say that had mental health issues, but were afraid to expose them. They didn't know if there were mental health issues as they are considered today. Well, if that's the case, I had a lot of mental health issues coming up. They didn't want to go to Vietnam. Why was I going to go 4,000 miles away to shoot somebody I don't even know? Mm-hmm. So I don't know what these mental, I don't know. So that's too broad of a statement for me to put this generation to that generation, this generation, that generation. I don't think I know. I'm just grateful to know that I survived that to get to a point to be on this show to talk about the differences.
So basically, from what you're saying is, literally, it was life and death. It's either I may not walk out the house tomorrow because of everything going on, or I may get sent to war at a time when war was still more of a prevalent thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And then now, where we don't have war, we have issues with drugs.
Yeah.
We have issues with financial things causing
Right.
a lot of mental health issues. And it's a different way to try and figure out how do you solve the problem.
Right.
And one of the reasons why we see a lot of homeless people on the street, not all of them, but most of them have an issue with drugs and addiction. And then where did that come from? And then speak about how when you were growing up, drugs wasn't even a thing.
No, as I indicated to you, there were drugs that were around, but you know, through the Vietnam era, we didn't have that kind of stuff from 1960 to about 64. It wasn't until the Vietnam vets came back and told me about the opium fields in Laos and everything. They were bringing drugs back. That's what the movie American Gangster was all about. Okay,
Yeah.
Bringing the drugs back. Well, I didn't know anything about that. Okay, I didn't know anything about a lot of the things that they were bringing back here, and a lot of them were addicted with Agent Orange and a lot of stuff that was going on. But recently, that I told you, but the whole gamut for in the 1970s, when I was telling you about the movie Superfly, that's when the thing took off about everybody could make money without going to work. Well, a lot of the factory jobs that were in America were being in Pennsylvania, they went over to Korea. A lot of manufacturing jobs went to China. A lot of manufacturing jobs are going to the Philippines. So we're in this country here, where you going to find a factory job when all the factory jobs are going overseas? And so they're going overseas, and then we're left to our own devices because when it says no work here, let me just be honest with you. There is work here if the American businessman pay more attention to helping Americans than to build a James Webb telescope to go on the edge of space to find out where life began. That's $13 billion you could put down here to talk about the homeless. You're talking about the fentanyl, even in Kensington, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. What is that called? Trink. What? Harsh tranquilizer plus with acid, and people and stuff eating from the inside out, and then people walking by and looking at it. Well, down in the South, when we were coming at that time, we were just trying to stay alive. We're blowing your house up or the church up or going to Vietnam. That was mental health issues for me.
Yeah. I mean, that whole thing about manufacturing stuff, I think we had talked about that at some point on our episode, is that changed a lot because they were blue collar jobs, but dudes have purpose. I go to the factory, I build the cars,
Right.
I make the steel,
Right.
I get a paycheck, it's stable work, I come home and I can live off of that.
Right.
As those jobs went overseas,
Right.
the areas where they were in didn't have any other infrastructure to say, okay, well, instead of factories, we're going to have tech, we're going to have this. It doesn't exist over there. Even to this day, the Rust Belt, the upper Midwest, the Northeast, the South, you see a lot of empty factories because they are all overseas now. Right. And some people say, well, why can't we just bring that back? Okay, let's bring all the jobs back over here. We'll build the cars, you'll build the steel, whatever. Well, we're at a point now where Americans have gotten so used to the cost of things that if we were to build iPhones here, for example, who wants to pay double or triple the price for an iPhone? So now we get into Americans' pocketbooks saying, hey, we can bring the jobs back here. We can pay our American workers good salaries. You ready to pay $3,000 for an iPhone? And that's where everybody's going to say, whoa, okay, time out. What's more important, get them jobs or get me cheap stuff? And people don't want to admit it because it's like, yeah, I actually want to be able to afford a car. I don't want to spend 3 times more, even if it's made in America by American hands.
Right.
I can't afford that. And so now we get into this whole up and down of, well, in order to keep the cost of goods down, it has to be made overseas with cheap labor. Call it what it is.
Yeah.
But then now you're not employing Americans. So what do you do now? And that's the result we have is a lot of them who can't do those jobs anymore have turned to drugs and saying, well, okay, I can't do it. So here's where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where when you look at it, you got Cuba here, you got China there. Yeah. Walmart got the world's largest Walmart there. And the industry, China is building a lot of stuff, man. Okay? Mexico, they got a lot of auto plants down there, okay? Well, Detroit, I mean, it's a dying city, man. I mean, where automobiles were built, okay? So you're going to Korea, the ship industry there, we can't make ships here. Said, okay, now, if we bring those jobs back here, then we're going to have to pay the average American worker at least $35,000 or $40 an hour. And we got to look at the bottom line. And the bottom line is the numbers here. If we can get it cheap over here, we can get it. Then my thing is that you got to look at the reality and what happens then. Then you say, well, where all these homeless people are coming from and where they're going. Then you say, well, who's homeless? You know, you have to look at it and say, well, who made them homeless? Did the system do that, or did they do that for themselves? And so we have a lot of questions to be asked ourselves if we want to survive as a nation. And do I see it happening? Yeah, we've been through a lot of stuff. We'll get through this, but cooler heads got to prevail to know that the American people needs help. And how we're going to do it.
And this speaks to a bigger point because we're addressing some of the core issues that people are facing out there, whether or not they'll actually tell you or not is, yeah, my dad and my granddad did this job. That job doesn't exist anymore. I don't know what else to do. And if I do a job that might be a teacher or a janitor, there's no way I could survive living here or even, frankly, most parts of the country. You can't make a living off of that anymore. And it requires 2 people to go out there and work to make household incomes work. So we can get into the whole dynamics of men and women and the relationship and gender roles and whatnot. But before we get to that, to me, it says, okay, if you're living in an area where those jobs that your dad and your granddad did don't exist anymore, are you as a man willing to adapt and say, okay, I can't do what they did. Let me go out and find a passion that I am or a field where I can't thrive in. And if that means I have to move from Indianapolis to Phoenix or from, you know, New Hampshire to San Francisco, am I willing to do that? And then the question becomes, well, you can't do that if you've already established a family, or it's going to be very, very difficult. If you bought a house somewhere, well, barely making it, and then you have a family, you can't just uproot them. And it puts dudes in a very difficult spot of, okay, now what do I do? And this is why a lot of us are taking time, 35, 40 years old, before we get our act together, because now we're seeing this is kind of how the world works. We have to figure this whole thing out before we get into marriage and family and kids. Otherwise, if we get in too early, we run the risk that now it's going to ruin the relationship. So part of that does mean that we got to take accountability on ourselves as men to say, okay, what's the next step before we get into those major commitments? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's the key. You got to be an empowered person, you know, and saying, oh, it's the economy, it's a job, it's the market. It's like, no, it's you. You got to figure your shit out. No one's going to do it for you. And I think a lot of what Zuberi's talking around mental health is, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at first it's like safety, sustenance, you know, survival. If that's what you're working with, like we're talking about the kids in Oakland that are robbing people, it's like they don't have the thoughts to think about how that affects you or me or Zubi. They're just trying to survive. Right. And so you're operating from a primal state of, what do I have to do to live? And from that state, you're not going to be asking yourself the questions of, how do I better myself? You know, how do I go do these things? Well, you got to get those things stable and steady, right? And then once you do that, I think that's when those other questions start to trickle in, and then the pressure of, well, I should be making this much money, or I should be doing this, or I should have this house. It's like they're problems that aren't that big of a deal at the end of the day, is what I think I'm getting to. Mm-hmm. Like, they're really not that big of a deal. Like, you don't want to move your family and you want to stay broke. Like, well, that's your choice. You got to get yourself in a place of empowerment. And then once you can do that, then you become, hey, what do I need to do to move forward? Mm-hmm. What do I need to do to make my life better? What do I need to do to take care of my family? When I built my business, I drove Uber for a year or two. Like, that sucked. That was like kind of embarrassing. Pick people up that are like, I know I should be more successful, and I'm driving them around town. You know, I'm just like, fuck, what am I doing, man? It's like, oh yeah, what am I doing? I'm making my life happen over here. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think we have way too many excuses nowadays in our society. And Zubi, you're talking about it, of these kids are going, well, you know, I didn't get an A on my test, so I'm going to kill myself. That's happening in schools today. It is. That's happening in school. It's like, man, that's where we've gotten to. That, like, if we're not getting an A on a test, like, we're failures as people. Yeah. That's a tough reality to live in. Yeah. You know, teen suicide's exponentially rising. Pre-teen suicide is now happening for the first time ever. That shows us that mental health is real, but it's because these problems that we're fixating on, they're mind-made shit. They're not how do I survive? They're how do I get better? How do I get more? Yeah. How do I get my iPhone cheaper? It's like, you're not going to win that game. I know that. You're not going to win that game. Now, you can play in it and you can ask yourself questions that make it better, but the pressure that we have on ourselves, I think that's what's breaking us down from the inside out.
So what do you think from your experiences holding a lot of people back? Because you talk to a lot of dudes who are trying to get their body in shape, and then you go to a lot of the wellness groups, spirituality groups, and you're kind of hearing, I'm probably sure, a lot of the same themes. What do you think has been an overall one that says this is what's really holding them back from taking that next step?
It's the person. It's the person holding themselves back by making excuses or not really wanting what they're saying they want. You know, a basic example is I have someone come into my gym and they weigh 300 pounds and they're 50% body fat, and their doctor says, if you don't start getting in shape, you're going to die in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I've seen those people come into my gym once a week for the last 7 years. And one person says, Nick, I'm ready. And the other person goes, I don't know if it's worth it. And it's like, what's the difference? Mm-hmm. Both people are on the same trajectory towards an early death, which last time I checked, okay, that stuff matters. Mm-hmm. And one of them goes, today's the day I'm changing my life. And the other one goes, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty expensive. It's $100 a week, you know, and they got done telling me they were ordering Uber Eats every day. It's like, well, the money's right there, but you don't want to make the changes required to make your life better. And I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. It's like, do you want to make the change or do you want to stay stuck? And until you're in enough pain, you won't do it. You know, so you got, in a weird way, you got to get into pain. You got to get so sick and tired of being sick and tired to then say, I'm not taking this anymore. I'm going to make change. And that's what you saw with civil rights. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That's what we see with mental health. That's what we see with career. That's what we see in marriages. You know, like a marriage sometimes got to get so bad before people are like, that's it. Either this thing's got to grow or die. And I don't give a shit which way it's going. So I think that's it. You got like, we're victims. That is the narrative going around in the world right now. We're victims. And I think it's probably easier for me to say that as the white male in the room. But I think the narrative is that we are victims and we are blaming everyone else for our problems. And we're not taking responsibility for our own lives. And that's what I would whittle it down to at the end of the day is
I think that
we've given our power over to someone else or something else.
Which is the big key, because I think for a lot of us to change, and I was talking to Tom Wolfe about this, who's a recovery addict, and he's trying to get the word out about the fentanyl use in San Francisco. He's like, I've been an addict, and I'll tell you, you could have given me every reason in the world to change. The only reason why I did is because I hit rock bottom, where I had literally lost everything. So the only way for me to go was up. And if we keep giving ourselves reasons to not hit rock bottom, maybe my mother bails me out and I'm 40 years old. Not bail me out of jail, but bails me out of like whatever. Or my father says, it's okay, you didn't get that job, you know, stay with me for a little bit and then you take your time getting it. Or maybe the girlfriend that says, you know, I don't need you to do X, Y, and Z. As long as you do this, I'm okay with it. It gives us sort of an excuse to not make ourselves better.
One of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life is when I was 28 or 29. I was broke. I didn't have enough money to buy myself a sandwich. Real story. I didn't have $5 to my name. I was living on my mom's couch. She walks into the room and she sits down and she looks at me and she's crying. And I have a really good relationship with my mom. And I look at her and I'm like, I need to go, right? And she just like cries and nods her head. And she just nods her head. And I was like, all right, I've burned every bridge in my life. Even my own mother just told me it's time to go. And then I moved to my dad's couch. And for some reason, I don't know what it was, mom's couch was okay. The second that I moved in with my dad and was living on his couch, I was like, this is it. My life can't get worse than this. And not because I don't like my dad. I love my dad. There was something about going to my father and needing his help and not being able to take care of myself that broke me. And it was like, I ain't doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. It was it was maybe the best thing that's ever happened. It was my own mother kicking me out of her house when I had nothing. And I look back and I go, without that moment, I'm not sitting here with you guys. If she would have allowed me to keep coasting and coddling me and supporting me, she did support me. She supported me with tough love. And it was hard. And it was the best thing she could have ever given me at that time, you know, and it changed my life.
Did you have that experience, Zuby?
Yeah, I did. Oh, you kidding? I mean, and that is at 61, you know? And at 61, I mean, you know, coming from the South and I wanted to help a lot of people. I got into drinking, you know, a lot of stuff, man. If there was a point of mental illness, you know, I lost myself for a minute. Didn't know what in the world. I had to go get me some help. I went to city team ministry, and I didn't know that the battle that I was having wasn't a physical battle. It was a spiritual battle that I was having. And I was mad at God, man. He had me do that. Beautiful wife, your son playing pro football, everything is going good. You know, how come I'm in this because I'm trying to help somebody? Where I come to find out, I learned you can't help everybody. And when I learned that, what happened, it caused me to a tailspin. But I had to want to get out of that dark hole because 99, as I explained to you earlier, 99% of the people in the world, I don't trust them. I don't even trust my own shadow because, number one, when it comes dark, your shadow leaves you, okay? So you stand there by yourself, okay? So what happened is I had to take a good look in the mirror and say, you know, I had to take a good look in the mirror and say, man, what the hell is wrong with you? You know, the thing about it is I had people, places, and things. As I told last time, I changed my Rolodex. There are a lot of people that used to know me that they're not afraid to talk to me, but they don't know what to ask me anymore because I've changed from the old JB or Zuberi to this one here. This one here will look you square in the eye, won't bat an eye, and tell you, you know, you're slip hanging. What do you mean? You're playing games, and I'm not going to let you play those games with me. And one of the things that I'm seeing is that I'm better than I was yesterday when at 61. I'm saying, why is an old fool like me, out of all the stuff that I've gone through some challenges like this, and I know better through the civil rights and everything. But what I didn't know, that the stuff that I suppressed down here, that I couldn't tell anybody about it because I didn't know how to express it. Or you mentioned about me, I didn't know that stuff down there was going to come up and I was going to vomit it out one day. I didn't know that. But I'm grateful that I did. I'm glad I got knocked. I'm glad I hit that bottom because that bottom now have me to sit here talking to you where people come in and ask me, how did I get out of that? I'll tell you how you get out of it. You got to have a willingness. You got to have a willingness to believe in God, number one. You got to have a willingness that this is what you want to do. And you got to stay away from a lot of people that's toxic. And that's what I learned how to do, stay away from a lot of toxic people. If you're toxic, don't go around JB because you can get your wig blown back. I don't want to hear it. So where I am, it's just like, I don't want to say something. It's just like what I'm seeing right now. You know, it's just like when a lot of these football players and everything that hit rock bottom. Look what's going on right now. The college protocol, okay? The idea is, okay, look at all these kids that are going through these different schools and everything. When I was coming out of school, you get an education, okay? These kids looking out to make money right now, and the NFL, it's only a very select few guys that can make it in the NFL, okay? Now, you got a new football league coming up in the spring. Now, all these guys are coming up and trying to, I want to make it there. Well, what about education? That's one of the reasons the SEC did so good so many years with Alabama, because the education code wasn't as structured as it was on the Pac-10. So what did it do? The Pac-10 broke down to do what? Make money. So you got all these kids out here to find out how to make this money right now with the name on the back. So for me to see all of that kind of stuff and for the rock bottom that I hit, and thank God my wife and I have been married for 54 years, number one, being married for 54 years, I'm forever grateful to God who's given me her. Because number one is that I'm watching how you treated my daughter, your wife, she's also your sister. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited about being here with you, Mike, and being with you to talk real talk. That's why this coin meant so much to me, because I'm real. A lot of people don't, when I say it's too broad a statement, but you know, a lot of people don't like coming and talking to me because I'm going to tell them flat out, honest the truth. If you want to hear it, if you don't want to hear it, then don't come my way.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. And one of the big things I took away from that conversation that we just had is the courage to be able to surround yourself with better people. Mm-hmm. Some of us get caught up in the whole, I grew up with my high school friends, and we grow out of high school years and years, and we're still with that core group of friends, and no one's going anywhere. We're all just in that same group, and we're still living like we're 18 or 17 years old, but now we're actually 35 years old, and no one's actually making themselves any better. But then it just takes that one person to say, you know what, I can't be around you guys that much anymore. I have to surround myself with people who are making it in this world, because I need to see how they're doing it so I can find a way to get better. And probably the only way that I can do it is to surround myself with more and more of those people, which is why a lot of our friends change. I mean, I've lost several friends throughout the years who have gone one way and I've gone the other, and they're doing fine for themselves. No disrespect to them, but I needed to find a path that was more on for me and be around the people that I wanted to be around, that were going to make me better. And it's just something that, you know, trying to get that through to a new generation can be difficult, because we get in our comfort zone. We don't want to do that because, you know, this is what I know. It's scary out there thinking about what happens if I break through this. So Zuberi, with that being said, and I wanted to sort of just get this into the next topic, which would have been, how does this whole role of men and women work, especially when you're married and in different generations and whatnots? But really, this is sort of the elephant in the room that a lot of people are afraid to talk about, but I know you're going to come right out and say it.
Yeah.
Well, basically, when you were growing up, you had two fathers.
I had two fathers.
There's a lot of kids out here who have no fathers.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm seeing that a lot more now frequently. And we've gotten to a point where you could say that marriage was more predominant in the 50s and 60s. And because of that, it kept everybody together. Mm-hmm. So there was more fathers raising young boys to be better men. And somewhere along the line, that just went aside. Whether that was because people were getting married too early and maybe they realized, you know, I can't do this, I'm too young, so I'm going to scram and do my own thing. Or it was maybe a lack of education in terms of, hey, you know, if you guys are going to take this next step, here's the things that you have to deal with. So we're just trying to figure out, where did this whole thing come from? Where did we see the divide where dudes just stepped out?
I'll tell you exactly for me, where it came from. I don't like keep going back to the 60s, but that's what I came out of. And that was a strong cohesiveness there, okay? The Vietnam War came along, man. 48,000 men died. A lot of them African-Americans that were coming out of college and stuff to build a cohesiveness between male and female in the African-American community. To me, that's where the turn because we would just begin to heal after the 60s, and when the Vietnam War came along, and it didn't end in '74. There were a lot of brothers, a lot of men in that war that never got a chance to raise the kids, and that's the differences I've seen. I'm fortunate enough to not to go to Vietnam, to come out of that, to see exactly what I'm telling you now. Everybody might not agree with it. I don't care. I lived in that area. I've seen what actually happened. I was almost involved myself. So when you saw how many African-American men from the historical black colleges period went to Vietnam, they didn't come back. So if you ask for the pinpoint of time, for me, that was it.
Right.
And actually, more men died after Vietnam from suicide
Sure did.
than they did in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about that. So then you talk about lack of support.
Yeah.
I think too the other thing, Mike, to answer your question of what's happened is, as men move from working in fields, working on farms with their kids being present with them, right? And most fathers, it's changing now as technology is growing, but for the last 30, 40 years, the men have been out of the household, right? They've been at work. They're leaving before the kids go to school. They're coming back after work, right? So the children are seeing their fathers usually in the kind of the worst way. I mean, I have that image of my dad, coming home 7 o'clock at night, taking out on my mom, taking out on me, ignoring us. And it's like, well, yeah, the guy's worn down. He's been beat up all day. He's not good enough here. He's not good enough there. So it's the fact that the men aren't in the household with their children, raising them, goes back to the mentor, goes back to men being raised by women. So the second men moved out of the areas to go work in cities, that's when we start seeing the deterioration of that nucleus family and the deterioration of men raising men. And I would say for myself, my father was in the home physically, but he wasn't in the home emotionally. He wasn't in the home mentally. And it's like, I look back and I go, man, that created a lot of trauma inside me. It created a lot of pain. I was bad. I was a troubled kid. I got expelled from high school. I was on antidepressants. I was suicidal. And I look back and I'm like, there was no help. Like we talk about mental health, I'm looking back, I'm like, where were the counselors? Where were the therapists? Where are the resources? But no, it's just like, he'll figure it out. He's 16. He's 17. He's got it. It's like, man, I barely graduated high school. Like barely graduated high school. And it's like, my father was there, but he wasn't there in a way I needed. But I think those things all add up. And this kind of circles back to then the inability of men to express how they feel and what they need. And it's like, man, I wish I would have had that looking back. I wish my dad would have had tools from his dad. But man, his dad, they weren't even allowed to talk about feelings. They didn't even, the word feeling probably wasn't even a word for, our great grandparents. So I think I like this analogy of we're passing the baton along. There's something I've come up recently. It's like, all right, my grandfather took himself as far as he could, whatever that was. And he passed the baton off to my dad. And then my dad took himself as far as he could, and he's still taking himself as far as he can. But then he passes that baton off to me. Now it's my job to run as far as I can with that baton. And my health, my marriage, in life, in mentorship. And at some point, I'm not going to be able to take myself further. And then either my son or, someone I've mentored, then they can take that and then they can keep going. I think that's what we're doing. We're continually passing the baton forward. We're all doing the best that we can. And we got to have grace, right? With that as well of, hey, I did the best I could.
Yeah. Well, this gets into a good conversation about the role of men and women in your typical relationship that we've seen and grown up with the father and mother. In your case, was your dad at least providing for the family financially? Was he there?
No.
So he wasn't. Okay.
No, and I think that's a lot of where his pain came from. Just to talk candidly, my parents are both attorneys. They were both very successful, and then they were broke. So they had this massive fall from grace, where they're the smartest people in town. They're the New Yorkers that moved to California. They have a law firm, and then overnight, more or less, they're broke. Their law firm's a failure. Their marriage is a failure. My dad was a pizza delivery guy for years. Here's a guy with a law degree, and he was so broken for so many years that he couldn't work. And if he had a job, it would last 3 months, 6 months, and then inevitably would get fired or do something to remove that. And I look back and I'm like, man, I have so much empathy for him now, though, which I didn't at that time, because at that time I'm learning about my father through my mother. right? Your dad's an asshole. Your dad's not doing this good enough. I look back, I go, my dad's driving a pizza delivery car in a small town where everyone knows him. I go, I don't have the balls to do that. There's no way I'm riding around town delivering pizzas to people that know me for who I am. Like, I look back, I'm like, man, that's, to me, what an example of being a strong man for your family. He was doing the best he could, but no, he wasn't able to really provide. And my family went through a lot of harsh financial times. I mean, I remember being a teenager and going to the store with my mom and her not being able to buy us food because they didn't have money, or my mom borrowing money from me that I was making at 15 years old. Like, my mom tells a story of she had to take me to the bank one day when I'm a teenager and remove $2,000 or $3,000 from my bank account so the family could pay rent. And I'm like, that's fucked up, man. I'm a 16-year-old kid, like, man in the household.
She's taking my money.
Yeah, she's taking my money.
Man.
And then I've had to really reparent myself, by the way, because of that. I've had to learn to stop taking care of everyone else. Kind of like you were saying, Zuberi. And I've had to learn to take care of myself and that I matter. And what I've noticed is the more that I've learned to parent myself and the more I've learned to take care of myself, then the more I'm actually able to take care of more people. It's this kind of inverse thing, right? It's like almost be selfish at first, of like, take care of your needs, take care of what it is that you require. And then once you've got that, then you can go out in your community, man. You can be a force. And then you can take it to a larger global space. But, you know, you got to take care of yourself and you got to have your needs met. But there was a lot of ups and downs, man, with money in my family and success and failure. And it's all stuff I've processed down. It's all stuff that's made me the man who I am also. So I'm not mad about it, which is cool too, to get to and talk to with you guys.
No, I get you, man.
Mike, if you don't mind saying, you see how much, if my voice break up, it's out of compassion and love, man. See, growing up, we didn't think white people had these kind of problems.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't think that. We didn't think they had issues like, you see how much we are so different, but yet so much alike? That this broadcast here can share a light that men can talk to each other, not at each other, man. That I'm sitting here listening to his story, man, and it was an everyday atrocity in my neighborhood that I always suspected that this was going to happen. And I'm hearing my brother here just talking about at 15 years old, what he was going through. At 15 years old, I was going through the same thing, basically, when the kid of Khrushchev and all the bombings that was going on, that the television saw. We didn't think white people had any problems like we had. Are you kidding me? They're human problems, man.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody go through it, but a lot of time, how are you going to suppress it? You know, we showed it, okay? This is where it would be, there's a difference between poverty and poverty stricken. We were talking about foods and stuff like that. I mean, what gets me, the word organic. Man, we were eating organic food because there was slavery, there was a lot of things that going on, man, but we grew our own food. The sweet potatoes, the collard greens and everything. That's what they call soul food, okay? We had nothing else to do, okay? Or I was telling you about the rabbits and the squirrels and the foxes and all that stuff. We ate those things out of necessity because we cannot go to the store and buy the things that are already killed and put in the store. And I'm going to kill it ourselves and grow it ourselves. So when I hear the word organic and I hear what he's going through, we couldn't have had this conversation growing up in the 60s in order, what a lot of people didn't talk about. There are a lot of, like, I don't like to use the word analogy of white and black, I don't, but for the sake of conversation, there are a lot of people on the other side of the track that are white, man, that felt the same thing we felt, but they couldn't speak out because the part of the people that were part of the problem on their side knew who they were supporting the side. They couldn't speak out. We couldn't speak out like this before. I'm just glad now that I'm hearing it, and my heart breaks. And my heart breaks because I hear him. I hear him where I was.
I appreciate that, and it's actually, you're the second black man that's told me that. One of my employees goes,
Come on.
He said to me, I shared this story with him, and he goes, I didn't know that about you. He goes, I figured you had everything given to you. And I was like, well, I'm not going to sit here and complain and cry, but it makes me actually wonder, is it important to really share that story that I went through of, hey, like, I may not be where you think I'm from. Like, my story may be a lot more traumatic and it may be a lot more similar, but you're the second person to say, hey man, like, I wouldn't have thought that about you. I didn't know that you went through stuff. And it's like, we're people go through shit. That's what being human's about. It's a hard thing this human experience is tough.
It is.
And we're all working something that's hard. And it's like, compassion is the experience of like, I I don't know what you've gone through, but I can feel it.
Yeah.
And I can support it and I can hear you. And if we can get that place, like, we're all people working through the same shit. It just looks different, you know? And it's like, man, everyone's got problems. Everyone's in pain.
That's why I was scared when I was laying next to that white guy in my neighborhood that was in my room. I was scared. I never, come on. White man in the South, in Mississippi, with J. Hoover got the FBI on the loose to seeing who's in these homes. And I'm sleeping back to back to this guy, scared, bro. He ain't supposed to have no problem. Number one, he's supposed to stay in Berkeley. He don't come down and sleep in the bed with me for. Are you kidding me? And then scared and stayed over my eyes all night long. And just was petrified. But to hear, it's rewarding not to hear your story, but to let you know how much we are both just alike, man.
Yeah, you realize that a lot of us deal with the same thing and process it in our own ways, which comes into a bigger conversation here, which is we kind of understand what we're going through. We see the same things or similar things. We have to process it a certain way.
Yeah.
Do we think that our female partners understand it the same way that we do? Do we think that they see the world the same way that we do? What have been your experiences? You've been married 54 years.
54 years.
You've had your ups and downs.
Right.
When you're going through things and you're trying to process it a certain way, do you think it's reciprocated the same way?
With my wife?
Yes.
In the last 10 years, yes. 40 of those years, no. Because number one, we were going through life, walking on eggshells. And people talk about, what happened in those 40 years? Life happened in those 40 years. I was scared to leave her. She was scared to leave me, I think. But we had to stick it out. And when I went through that, I hit rock bottom to find myself. But it was in the last 10, I actually fell in love with her. Because this was somebody that going on the road of life is tough in itself. But you're going to ask somebody to go along with you and going to share the same things that you share. There are a lot of things we talk about that I couldn't share with her at the time because, number one, it's not that she wouldn't comprehend it. She wouldn't understand it because we came from two different areas. She didn't come through what I went through, although it was there. But she doesn't have the same scars that I have. And growing up and seeing that my mom going through that, she didn't see her mother and father going through that. I saw my mother and father going through that and getting separated. So the scars I had, who do you tell these scars to? And you got to be very ready to have somebody to understand the scars that you're going through.
Well, then how do you do that? Because in being married 54 years, coming from a different generation, there's probably a lot of things that you're trying to process through life in general. And then on the other side, you're probably getting a lot of pushback saying things are supposed to go this way. Why don't you do this for me?
Well, see, one of the things that throughout, for as that's concerned, the American dream. What is the American dream? Who put the stamp on the American dream and the standard? Everybody trying to give up to that American dream don't get there. Then it becomes the American nightmare. Well, I had to eliminate that for me because it's not a dream. What happened is it's life. So what my wife and I are doing is that we began to talk to each other about our inadequacies. Hey, this is where I am. I'm hurting because you said this to me. And let me tell you why. When you said that, you have no point in reason in thinking that what you said to me might hurt me. Well, I didn't think I said anything to hurt you, but it did. Before, I didn't do that. 40 other years, I wouldn't do that. I just suppressed it and moved on. Now I do because, number one, my health is at stake for this. Not just a word, but my health is at stake for that. Mm-hmm. That's where I am.
So what do you do when you get the threats of, well, if you're not giving me what I need, I'm going to be out of here?
Oh, no, we ain't going nowhere. We 54 years, she ain't going nowhere.
No, how did you process it back in the day?
I used to go off and sometimes be by myself like I met you that day. And I try to process it because I didn't want to show any anger. You know, I'm tall, I'm 6'2", African-American, and the expression that we all violent. And I didn't want to show that side of me of anger and resentment because of something she said. So I had to go off and just process, okay, how do I really want to deal with this? Do I don't want to deal with it on her level? I don't want to deal with it my level. So there's a medium in between that said, you know what, why don't you back up? And back up for a minute doesn't mean that you're weak. It shows that you have common sense for yourself. Now, where it goes after that, because you made that decision, that's on them, not me.
Well, some of the problems that we have in these conversations and relationships is, from our point of view, we know what we have to do out there in the world. We know what we got to take care of. I can't expect it from my partner to understand that because we see the world in a different light. That being said, even though I think I know what I'm doing or I'm going the way that I have to go to, you might get a lot of pushback from the side saying there's these other needs that you got to fill. And then we're sitting here going, hey, this is what I have to do. Can you see it from my point of view? They have their point of view too.
That creates a lot of tension in my relationship. My wife has a very high standard of the life she wants to live and her pictures and dreams of what she deserves. And I'm fortunate that she makes her own money. She makes more than me, so she can buy that, right? She can create that. But for me, it's like materialism isn't that important to me. I like nice stuff, but I don't have to have it, right? Where she's at a place still where she has to have it to feel good about herself. So we actually fight a lot about, the expectations of what we should be living and how we should be living. For example, I got her a dog for her birthday, and now we got to send the dog to a private trainer that's $150 3 times a week. And I'm like, we got to pay $2,000 a month to send this dog to daycare. Like, what world are you living in? Like, I'm not living in that world. You may be. So a lot of our tension comes from the two of us, like Zubi said, trying to figure each other out and what balance we're at. And I think a lot of that is you got to know what your own value or what your own stance is, right? And say, hey, look, I'm not willing. I like the word willing a lot, by the way, when it's in relationship. Like, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to pay $2,000 for a dog to go to daycare. Am I willing to pay a couple hundred? Yeah. So hey, I'm willing to pay $500. Mm-hmm. Are you willing to pay $1,500? If she says yes, then I got to live with that. Be like, okay, this is what we're doing. But if she says no, I want this, then am I willing to stand up for myself? I think a lot of men don't stand up for themselves.
Yeah,
we're really afraid. We're disempowered in a lot of ways. Yep. It's much more than people realize. And it's like, that's not a toxic masculine trait. That is, this is what I am willing to do. This is what I'm not. And then am I willing to keep that boundary? Because a boundary unexpressed is not a boundary at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I got to be responsible. I'm not willing to do this. We live in a really nice apartment up the street from you, Mike, in Russian Hill. And when we moved in, I said, I'm not willing to pay $5,000 a month for an apartment. She goes, well, I am. It's like, okay, great. Well, then how much are you willing to pay? And then we can figure it out from there, right? But it creates tension because I'm not willing to just lay down and give her whatever she wants. And on the other hand, she grows me because I have to focus on my career in order to be with this woman. So it's got its ups and downs, its pros and cons, but you got to find within the relationship, and also what matters to you. So that comes up for us a lot is one, we all have different pictures of what we want, and how in a relationship do you get those to be the same? Like, you might not be able to on some things, and that's okay too. You don't have to live the same life with someone. You're, like you said, you're just moving in a direction, and you hope that you can stay connected to the person, kind of tethered. But sometimes I'm dialed in, sometimes she's a disaster, other times she's good and I'm a disaster, right?
Yeah.
And once in a while, we're both dialed in and we're happy together, and it's like, and those are the great moments. And I've been married 6-7 years. I'm still a rookie compared to Zubi over here, but it's like, man, you learn a lot about yourself. I've learned so much about standing up for myself and being strong and expressing my needs. And I also know that's where I need to continue to grow in relationship, is being really open and honest. And hey, this is what I want, or this is what I need, or when you treat me like this isn't okay. And notice my language, none of that is attacking, none of that is toxic. That's very conscious language of, hey, what do you need from me? And I know I struggle with that, of asking that question. Where am I not showing up? That's something I would think I need to get better at. Like, hey, where am I not showing up for you? And then being willing to listen and sit with that and receive feedback. So there's a lot of this stuff we could talk about this forever, all being in a relationship, but
I'll try to make it simple for a lot of the people who are listening. The key word that you said there that I've learned over time is that word boundaries.
Yeah.
Can't tell you how many times you've learned the hard way what this actually means. And I think a lot of dudes get very afraid that if I don't give her what she says she wants, then she's going to leave me and I'm going to be on the street alone, which is not what's going to happen. But what you what you lose if you cave in all the time is you lose that respect deep down. They'll never tell you this to your face, but when they don't have a respect for you, then it breaks away everything else. That's the foundation there. So when you show that you have boundaries, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Don't be a dictator about it and say it's my way or the highway, but this is the boundary. This is where we have, this is our life. This is what we make, whatever it is.
And when you don't protect those boundaries, it leads to resentment.
Yeah, that's a big one right there.
The boundaries, I mean, Mike, you know, we met, I got boundaries. I don't let too many people. My wife, after that fall I had, knocked down to my knees, I set some boundaries right here that I don't let too many people get there because over here is too raw. And what's over here too raw, if you begin to bend those boundaries, I need that strength for me. I need that. I'll just give an example. When we were talking about weakness, you know, there are some conversations I don't get in when I'm driving. When I'm driving, we were coming to church one day, and we were driving, and we were just talking. I said, listen, let's get home and talk about this first. I just left church feeling pretty good. Let's get home first. Man, we came out 237 one-on-one, and she's still going at it. I said, you know what? Okay, stop. I stopped right on the side of the road, way on the road. I got out of the car. I said, you drive from here, from this point on, because what happened, I'm not going to have you cause me an accident. I'm looking at I'm looking at the car here. I'm looking at the car in the back. I'm looking at this side, and you instead giving me this. So I'm going to get out of the car. You going to get out of the car and make me drive home. No, I'm not going to make you drive home because we're going to stay right here because I would get my boundaries because I know I don't like where my feelings are right now. In this conversation that you are having right now, and I ask you, let's wait till we get home and you still coming at me that way. No, you drive from here home and I'm going to let you feel what I'm going through and what I'm looking at. She didn't like it. And I didn't care if she didn't like it. I'm talking about my boundary where if I'd have let that broken up, then we probably would end up really in an argument. And I don't like arguments because arguments it's just like two people going up a mountain. One person coming down and the other person going up. They get stuck on that mountain. What happens? Somebody got to lay down so they can cross over. So what happened is I learned to lay down when I need to and cross over when I need to. Because it's not easy because you're dealing with another human being and another sex. That's what I meant.
Yeah. But that lesson about boundaries applies to everything in your life. Your job applies to your friendship. You know, we were talking about the friends that you had growing up, and they think that because you're in California that you got money. So they start asking you, hey, can I borrow some money? Like, whoa, you're my friend, but this is where we don't cross. This is my money, not yours.
They think, oh, you living in California, and well, man, you have money. Man, do you know how expensive it is in California? Yeah. I tell you, you want to swap places? No, man, we didn't. Come on, don't go there with me. You know, when we was in high school, I knew when we was in high school. That was in 1966. What did that got to do with now? I just need $20. We didn't ask for $20 instead of linen. No, I ain't getting you nothing. And I had to cut them loose. You got to cut. There's some people you just got to cut them loose. And I've learned to do that in a loving way. In this spoon, you know if it's sugar or manure. You don't know. See, that's how raw I am.
Yeah. There's a really good line. I think it's Brene Brown. I might be wrong, but it's about boundaries, and it says boundaries are where my love for myself and my love for you meet.
Wow,
I like that a lot. Like, okay, so to have a boundary, you need self-respect and value and worth, and also to understand the other person, have compassion for them, and then to see, okay, where do those two meet? And also that can change over time too. That's important.
Yeah, it is.
You know, you can soften boundaries, you can harden boundaries, and there's something you said earlier that I really liked. You said people, places, and things. Right. I think we forget that. A lot of times we think of just people,
right? But
people, places, and the things you're around, they all affect you. There's a really cool line I've been liking lately. It's like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Wow.
Because it's saying the people you surround yourself with are going to directly impact where you go. And also show me your community.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Show me the things you do. Right. Are you drinking or are you exercising? Right? Like each groups can have different people that come into it. And the more you hang out with those groups, the more they're going to affect your life. So I think that's where we can really blend boundaries and worth and who we're surrounding ourselves with. And going, wow, okay, like I can kind of see the trajectory of my life right now if I look. It's not really that hard.
Yeah.
Am I around people that are positive or negative? Like that's a pretty easy start.
Yeah.
Is my partner positive or negative? Like If I'm sleeping with someone every night who's negative, like, all right,
Yeah.
you know, how's that going to work out for you? Or if you're sleeping with yourself every night and you're negative.
I think this is one of the keys to the whole men's mental health thing right here. Is part of that is boundaries.
Right.
Think about your friends who always say yes. They're the yes guys. Whatever you need, I'll do this for you. They're a job. Hey, can you take on this task? Whatever. You won't get paid anymore, but we just want you to do it. Okay, yes, I'll do it. You take on so much of a burden because you want to be the nice guy, because you want to be everybody's friend, or you want to be the person that you think it's going to attract a lot of women by being nice, which doesn't work that way.
Right.
And now you're putting so much of a burden on yourself. And then if it gets into your finances because you're spending too much money on things you shouldn't be, or lending out money, now you're putting yourself in this deep, dark hole that you yourself created because you didn't know when to say no. You didn't know when to step up for yourself. And I don't know where that came in society, because in your generation, it didn't seem like it was much of an issue.
No.
But yet for our generation now, it seems to be okay for a lot of dudes to just be this
It's from the
too nice.
It's from post 60s, 70s. It's when there started to be more of a movement for men to become softer.
Yeah.
And what happens is
Absolutely.
men didn't become softer; they became betas, which is different.
Right.
So we were taught, you know, kind of the generation before us to be soft, to be submissive, to be betas, and it's like, and then it created the nice boy, and like where I've landed with being nice is like, I'm not interested in being nice. I want to be kind.
Right.
I want to be loving, but nice doesn't work for me. I'd rather you not like me for who I am
Right.
than you like me for who I think I should be to you.
Right.
Like,
Now, was that part of that whole, I mean, and you grew up during this, was this part of that whole feminism movement?
Yeah.
Where
Absolutely.
built on the fact, and I get it, back in the day, there were a lot of things that we did that people didn't like. Women didn't have the opportunities that they have today.
Right.
And even men back in the
Right.
day, you were told you had to go work, you had to make money. You probably had to work at a job you hated,
Right.
but you had to do it because you needed money to make for the family. If you had it your own way, you might have started a company, but you
Right.
couldn't do it.
Right.
So things have changed for the better overall. But in going a little farther across the pendulum,
it
we
was an
created
over-
more problems.
It was an overcorrection. And
Yeah.
it created a soft man.
Right. And you're right. And this one man I know of, I mean, it was sad, man. It's really sad. This dude was a Navy SEAL. And when he went around his wife, man, it was like neutered, man. I'm serious.
I've seen that. Got
Yeah.
some buddies like that.
I'm looking at this guy. Are you kidding me? Are you taking that? And you were a Navy SEAL, bro? I mean, you talk about mental health issues, man. I mean, you go through all of that, and then you come back and you couldn't deal with this. So I had to back away because I didn't want her to think I was trying to give him no. Won't you be like JB? No. You be like yourself. Don't try to do what I do. No, don't bark up this tree. No. You be you. Let me be me. I'll be me. I got my own stuff I got to deal with. Well, I'm gonna have to deal with your stuff and mine. No, that ain't happening. That's not happening. And that's why those boundaries are boundaries. I didn't know how to set boundaries before. I know what my boundaries are, and I look at them and I know what my triggers are. I know what my triggers are, and I look at them when they'll crop up every now and then. But if you don't have the boundaries to recognize what your triggers are, they will bombard you. I don't care if it's alcohol, I don't care if it's women, I don't care what it is. Triggers are triggers, and if you recognize what your triggers are, that'll help. It helps me. I can't speak for all men, but it helped me to understand what my triggers are and know how to deal with it, to see it, look at it, and how to deal with it.
Well, let's try to help some guys in their 30s and 40s now they might get, okay, I need to develop boundaries. Well, what does that mean? How do I do it? What are some of the things that I can speak to my own point too of what I've learned. Yeah. Some of the things that we've learned over time that have helped us develop those boundaries. I'll just throw a couple out there right now. For me, it was when I started going to the gym 5, 6, 7 days a week. The confidence you develop by working on your own body, your own physical strength, especially as you get older and you maintain that gives you it gives me a lot of confidence for a lot of things in the rest of my life. And then working on my own finances and saying, you know what, I can't be buying that stuff anymore. I can't afford it, or I don't want to afford it. Starting to invest in my own financial future. So this idea of when I retire is not like, I don't have any money, which creates a lot of insecurity. It's like, no, I have things that are planned. So when I do retire, whenever that is, I will be taken care of. But it's gotten me to the point where I have to start that now before I built that self-confidence, which allows me to have the freedom, to have the boundaries, knowing I wouldn't do this, but if I'm at a job where I didn't like the bosses, or I didn't like the way things are going, you give yourself the freedom to be able to say, maybe I can go somewhere else or try a different career. Go from, especially tech people nowadays, AI is taking over a lot of the jobs. So now it's, do you have the ability to leave an industry like that and go do something else because you have the financial freedom to do so? What are some of your guys' thoughts on how we can help dudes start to develop boundaries and what that really means for them?
I think first of all, it's having conversations around it, right? And the key thing with anything is awareness. Like Zuby said, like until you're aware, and somebody may be listening, and this might be the first time the boundaries is actually landing on them, and they're going, wait, I don't even know what a boundary is. Well, now we give you a framework, right? It's a line, it's a standard. So I think that's the first piece is starting to understand it, starting to focus on it, and then starting to go ask yourself the question, like, what are my boundaries? Where do I want to set them? Where am I not setting them? I know for me last year, about a year and a half ago, I really started working on boundaries. And what I noticed was I didn't have the amount of self-worth that I thought I did. I was kind of taking care of everyone else but myself. Or like, hey, you need some money? Here you go. Or like, hey, my employee wants more? Here you go. But now I was like, wait, I'm not taking care of myself. So there was a lack of a boundary there.
Oh, was that really fast? Was that because you were afraid of them not being your friend or afraid of losing them? Was there some sort of fear that it said, okay, I know I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to give him that?
I think so. And I think some of it wasn't awareness. I didn't realize I was doing it. So again, it comes back to knowing yourself. And then what I found was once I started practicing it, which is then the next step, right? You're not going to hear this most likely, understand it, and have it done perfectly. You might suck when you first start at something. So I started like blurting out my boundaries, and I was becoming like really reactive with people. Right. And someone would say, hey, do you want to go do this? It's like, nope, not doing it. I'm like, dude, what? I'm like, whoa, what the hell was that? Like, what part of my personality? So I wasn't comfortable setting the boundary at first of what I noticed. So it took practice to then say, no, I'm actually good. Thanks for asking, but I don't want to do that. That took like 3 months, 6 months. And now a year and a half later, it's like now I can express a boundary in a calm, centered way. So I think there's awareness, right? Asking yourself the questions of what are my boundaries, getting curious, and then setting them, and then practicing. And if you could do all those things, like pretty quickly, you can then start to do it, and start with something small. It doesn't have to be a big thing with your wife. It could be a small thing with a friend, or it could be getting to the gym at 6 p.m. every day, like you said. So leaving work at 5:30, whatever it is, start with one thing, get good at it. And then as you get more adept, then take it into something bigger.
What are your thoughts?
Mine was that, I'm a giver. I just love helping people, and I couldn't differentiate between me giving them and they taking. And what happened is once they were taking, and when you're a target and you're open, and people can see those targets, if they can get something from you, and you don't have the ability to set boundaries, you get steamrolled. And I got steamrolled from family members and friends about money, okay? Oh, well, let's call JB and let's call Zuberi. He'll help us. And I did it. And I did it because I saw my mom do that, for helping. But I had to set the boundaries that I'm not Jesus Christ. You can go to the same Jesus Christ I go to. I had to set some strong boundaries with my family members and my friends, and learn they have the ability to say no. I'm not doing that. Ask somebody else. If you want to borrow some money, go to a bank. Don't come to me. Okay. That's what I mean. I think I can borrow this from James, JB and everything. And I can't say I was stupid enough to do it. I just did it because I consider friendship and money, they don't mix. And what happened is I had to learn that my boundaries, that there are a lot of people that, I'm just talking about me, there are a lot of people that will land down who I can borrow some money from. Yes. Let me see. I think JB living out in Foster City, he got some money. Let me see if I can borrow some money. Guy called me from Los Angeles at 12:30 at nighttime.
Damn, that's desperate.
If I can go wire him $100 at Western Union. And I almost did it. I said, you mean to tell me you're going to call me from Los Angeles? Well, if anything done in the dark is going to come to light. I should have known, man, what he was out there talking about $100 for. He was trying to buy some drugs. That's what he was trying to do. So what happened is I had to learn how to set boundaries. And the hard boundaries sometimes I had to set the boundaries to my family, sometimes to my wife, and sometimes to my son. But I know what those boundaries are. that I have the ability not to hurt them or not to say no. I'm just saying I just got to process it for a minute.
Now, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this because this has been my experience, but I'll just ask it. When you start to do this, do you notice that you improve relationships with people or partners, or do you lose people or partners?
I lost everyone.
Lost everyone.
I lost every last one. Once they went to, excuse me, I didn't mean to cut you. But once they couldn't come to me anymore, then the phone call get less and less and less. I don't call, hey, how you doing anymore? I don't even hear from him anymore. But I hear from him 2 or 3 years later. Man, I ain't heard from you in a long time. Well, you made the last phone call. Okay? So what happened is that helped me to set up my boundaries, knowing what people were coming at me for. I know a lot of money, man, but
you didn't regret it, though. That's the main thing. So you were willing to lose a friendship or a family member to say, you know what, this is what I got to do. If you don't want to be in my life anymore, you do your thing.
You got to do your thing. I had to do one of my brothers that way. I had to do that. No, I'm not doing that. I mean, you've been in the Navy, you've been in the military. I mean, you want me to put you on my Comcast bill to send you a phone down there? Yeah. Come on. You want me to say, okay, I'm paying on it, but when you get the phone, you talking about you seeking job and everything, but all of a sudden I see this phone bill coming back, you done called everywhere. Now then I had to cut him off. And did I lose any sleep over it? No. I'm not losing the sleep off of cutting on things that you're going to come at me with and you get mad with me because I'm trying to help you with this. Stay mad.
You got similar experience?
Well, I think you're able to say that because you've got wisdom. You've got age, right? And it's like in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, I've had both experiences. I've had both. I've seen relationships get better because people respect me more, because I'm respecting myself more. And I think those are the relationships I want more of, by the way. And then I've seen it go the other way where you set a boundary with someone and then the contract that you have in that friendship is broken in essence, right? And it's an unspoken conditional contract of, I'm your friend if you do this for me, which may be give them money, which may be give them support, which may be go drink with them, you know, whatever it is. But it's like once you say, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore, then you do need to be willing to lose that friendship. Yeah. And I think that's probably at the core why we don't say no and why we don't set boundaries, because we're afraid to lose the person. And if the person doesn't love you for who you are, if it's conditional, then ask yourself, is that relationship what you want? So I think it really, again, comes down to your own self-worth and your own self-value and saying, look, if you want to be in my life, great. And if you don't, that's okay too. But at least we know where each other stand. So I mean, I've had that with my dad. You know, my dad 5-6 years ago called me for money. And I said, look, I got you, but this is the last time. This is it. I'm like, this is bringing up my family. This is bringing up stuff from when I'm 15. You know, my mom's taking me to the bank. Like, I'm like, this hurts. I got to let you know right now, this hurts deep. Like, and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is it. And what I thought was cool from that is he heard me, he listened, and he's never done it again. And since then, actually, I've seen my dad's success take off. Because again, it was kind of that full circle thing of, all right, I'm cutting you off. I love you. You're my guy. And I'm cutting you off in this aspect. And then I've seen him grow because he knows that backstop's gone and he had to then focus on himself and make it happen. It was like, that was a cool experience. I couldn't have done that at 25. I did it at 35, you know? But yeah, I think you got to be ready for people to leave your life and vice versa when you set boundaries. And that's okay. And I think that's why we don't. We're afraid. And don't be afraid, man. It's like, if you're listening, like, love yourself. The people that are supposed to be with you are going to stay with you. The ones that aren't, they're not, and that's all good.
Well, I think that the biggest fear, I mean, it's one thing to say that we lose our friends. It might be easier for dudes to get over that, but the big one is, are you willing to lose a relationship with a significant other? And, you know, as we get older, we change. Maybe we're not the fun, loving people we were in our 20s when it was all party and having a good time or whatever it is. As you get older, your life changes and you have to adapt to it to become a better person, or you become stagnant and then you sort of live in the past, like we talked about hanging out with the high school friends like back in the day. But a lot of people get scared of, how do you set the boundaries and then also not come off the wrong way if you don't want to lose a relationship? And in my own personal experience has been at setting the boundaries, but I need to hear from you as well. What is it that I need to do better in your mind? And if it's something that is within my own boundaries and it makes me a better person with us, then we can do that. But if you're asking for the moon and I have to make a hard decision, do I keep my boundaries or do I compromise them? And if I compromise them, then we talk about the respect thing. Now you've sort of changed the game because you're trying to please something else.
Right.
And it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
You guys got thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'm not afraid to lose friends. I'm not afraid. I used to because I am a friendly person and I wanted the camaraderie. But I didn't know what mean losing them would entail me to do. It grew me. I don't have to plow into that relationship to hold it from one side. It's got to be from both sides. And if you don't hold it from together where we both understand it, then if you got to leave the relationship, then I'll leave it. And I'm all right with it. I'm 75 years old. I have never been more happy with me in a long time by making these decisions. Do I look back at them? I take a peek, and that's it. Because I can't look back and go back and clean some of that stuff up that I did. And I was there. I can only look forward. And I'm happier about me making this, not being afraid to make a decision. It's not right or wrong, just making the decision. That's the key. If you make the decision, live with it. If you don't, live with it. But I'm not afraid to make a decision like that at all. When they get ready to come to friends or associates, and like I mentioned to you before, an associate will cut you with a knife. A friend will use a scalpel to get to the marrow of the bone. Let's get out here because you know you off the chain and you know you ain't right. I can accept that from a friend. I can accept it, but an associate I can't. That's not another conversation.
Yeah.
I think I'm with you, and I think sometimes you got to pull weeds out of the garden so it can grow.
Yeah.
That's just the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and that can be tough, and that can be hard. And there's a great line one of my teachers says. She says, "Are you willing to give up what you have for what you want?" I think that's a great line. Are you willing to give up the life that you have for the life that you want? And because, man, it's comfortable where we're at a lot of times, and we know what we're getting, and we know what the relationship is, and we know the boundaries, and we know the setup. But it's like when you change the game, when you change a variable, it's like everything's going to change. So like, are you willing to give up what you have for what you want? That's a question only you as a man can answer on the inside. No one can answer that for you. And Zubin's point of the decision either way is fine. Right. Action or no action is fine. Just be the one that chooses what you're going to do. And then you're empowered. You're empowered. Yeah. It's simple stuff. It's not easy, but it's very simple.
Exactly.
It's very simple.
For you specifically, like your relationship, you have your wife seems like an incredible person, and she's definitely got a lot of strong will. And a lot of guys get intimidated by that. What have been some of your biggest tips that you've learned to how to work with that within a relationship? Because we live in a day and age where a lot of women are being told you got to be strong, you got to be independent. It's not a bad thing, but like we talked about, if you go too far, now it's okay. Are you so independent that now why am I even here? Like what's going on?
It's tough because I'm very strong-willed too, and she's extremely strong-willed. So I think it's actually kind of rare to get two people that are as strong-willed as we are together. And one of my buddies said this, and I think it's a hilarious metaphor. He goes, you guys are like two porcupines trying to.
The way to put it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, everyone's getting hurt, man. He goes, one of you has got to put your coils down. And I was like, that's so good. He goes, so my wife and I literally have this joke from that. If she's being too riled up, I'll look at her and I'll go, hey babe, coils down. Wow. And literally like that, right? Or she'll do it to me. Right. So we've actually been able to take some like jokes or take some like frameworks, that things that we're pretty neurotic about, but we're able to then make a little lighthearted joke. And for some reason, it kind of like puts our defenses down. Because I think when both people are strong, you can come in with a lot of defenses up. So we just both have to kind of say in like a joking, loving way, hey, put the coils down, or you do something, and that helps us lighten up. So that's super helpful for us.
Gotcha.
But I'd be bored personally with a woman that wasn't fiery and wasn't tough and didn't have her own opinions, because I'd probably walk all over her. Hence why I have a strong wife who doesn't let me do that.
It'd be difficult. A lot of guys would say they would want that. Like, okay, she does what I tell her to do. Yeah. And you realize, well, in a different generation, when maybe that was more prevalent, one thing, but in today's day and age, do I want to come home and just have someone just there waiting for me, twiddling their thumbs, or do I want them to be doing their own thing? And then when we have our own time together, it's all right, how do we work through this? which is something that I couldn't listen from my father or my grandfather because it's a different generation. They couldn't tell me that. They could only tell me, hey, back in the day, this is what we did. You know, you get married at 18, you have kids, and you figure it out. Go on, do your thing. Different variables now in today and how to live in today's world with the cost of everything. So it's...
I always had an expression when we first got married. I didn't know how much I was going to use it without saying it. I might not always be right, but I ain't never wrong. But I keep that. How important is the argument that you're having? How important is it for you to win or you to walk away? Now, I might win it because I'm a male and I see a lot of things that what she's saying here. But is it important for me to steamroll over her and let her see what I'm seeing and be right about it? And she's buckled. I can't do that. I might not always be right, but I ain't never wrong in my assessment of what I'm seeing. And I'm all right with that. I'm not saying you're right, I'm right, or you're wrong. I'm not saying that. But what I'm trying to present to you, I'm seeing something different. But if you have the ability to listen to what I'm telling you, do you want to? So in my own self, I might not always be right, but I ain't never wrong. That's something that I work out. If I want to win this, we know how to win it. But do I want to give it up? Yeah, I want to give it up. And it teaches me the whole perspective on where I am.
And yeah, what's hit me on that too is like relationship, especially with your partner, it's not a finite game. There is no winning or losing the relationship.
Right.
The way you lose is by constantly fighting and having to be right or wrong, and then you get divorced.
Right.
So it's an infinite game, which means there is no winning or losing. There's just growing. And I love that. It's like, I don't need to be right. Like, I don't need to make her wrong for me. I don't need to make her wrong for me to be right.
That's right.
Yeah.
We can both be right. And we can both disagree. You ever notice that? You get in an argument with someone, and by the end of the argument, you're like, actually, I kind of agree with what you're saying, but I don't want to. This is kind of making me upset now that I see where you're coming from. It's like, that's just a lose-lose if you got to be right. Yeah. So remembering that it's an infinite game in relationship, and you're going to continue to grow. If someone's got to be right and someone's got to be wrong, that's not a healthy way to be.
And if you see somebody tipping them over the edge, and you know you have the ability to tip them over further, you better be, speaking about relationship, you better be ready to be able to pick up the pieces on the other side. Because if you don't do that, you're going to continue to push and push and push until there are no pieces there to put together. That's my if I break up, that's what early on in our marriages, we were trying to fight to see who was right. And dumb as I can be, I don't want to tip her over. That's my partner. That's who I'm actually going on the road of life. Now, better be ready. And you can't say sorry enough for the pieces that are broken. You can't even mend them back together because it's going to always be back there. And that's what I made a decision on about my boundaries on where to go and when to go and how to put them up or let them down. That's my decision.
I love that. It's like the compassion that's coming out of you and not using truth as a weapon.
Come on.
Like, just because I know something to be true doesn't mean I have to say it to you, especially if it's going to have impact on my partner that's going to hurt them.
Right.
Like, I love my wife. I don't need to be right to the point when I hurt her. That's a beautiful thing, Zuberi, to say like that. Do I want to put her into pieces that I can't put back together? It's like, no, I don't. I do not. Thanks for sharing that, man.
It's like, yeah, I'm right, but look what I'm left with.
Look what I created.
What is the price you've paid to be right?
Yeah. And that's the bigger challenge, is to find that balance, because if you don't push enough, then you get walked over. So it's that fine balance of, okay, where's my boundary at? As this is where the line is, and this is what we can work with.
Right.
And, the whole point of today's show was to really talk about the mental health issues with men and sort of some of the roots and where your guys' experience has been on. And we definitely got through a lot of that. We're not going to solve the problems with everybody. We never will. But hopefully people can take something and learn from this going forward. We didn't even get into the financial side of it or the fitness side of it, which is totally fine, because these are things that people probably don't hear on most of your typical podcast shows. Usually it's get in shape and you'll be fine, which is definitely one thing. Get your money straight and you'll be in a better position, which is definitely not wrong. But there's other parts here that you sort of just have to learn over time. And unfortunately, it may take falling on your face several hundreds of times maybe before you realize, okay, this is what it means. This is what boundaries are. If I do this that I thought was wrong because it makes me seem mean or uncaring of others, why am I getting the result that I want? Right. Okay, but this is telling me something here. Judging people based on their actions, not on the words that they actually say. Right. And you realize, okay, this is sort of how the game of life works. This is how human nature works. You're never going to, it's not going to be I hit 45 and I learned everything. You're 75 and you're still learning. It's the willingness to be open to see, how do I change going forward? What can I learn to make me a better person? And that whole idea of boundaries, once it's one thing to actually say it. For a lot of guys in their 20s, it won't click because you just don't have the life experience yet to know what that really means. As you get older, over time, you start figuring out this boundary thing, and it improves your mental health overall, along with getting your body in shape. And I think if we can get that message out there more, it's going to do a lot of wonders to address some of the mental health issues that are going on with a lot of dudes today. Right. So this has been a great conversation, guys. Thank you both so much. It's been about 2 hours.
Thank you.
Time flies when you're having a good time and when you're getting good information out there. Nick, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably on Instagram is the best one, Nick Palladino-King, and that's where I'm hanging out most of the time. And if you're in San Francisco, come over to my fitness studio, Tribe Fitness, and come hang out, get a workout in.
I just want to say, Mike, man, thank you so much for this. And my boy breaking to love this man. I mean, nobody, the emotions is a weapon of it. I found a connection with a brother who I love. I can say that. And we just met today. Will we ever meet again? I'm taking away from here a growth, man. That anyone that's looking at this, man, just check it out with somebody who you can feel confident. We didn't expect this today. I didn't. Just to be real, but I want to thank you for calling me and to meeting my brother, man. I mean, I got to tell you, I really do that, and I want to let you know how much I feel about this, Mike. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And you guys are doing me a real solid by sitting down on a Sunday when we could be watching football instead. We're like, no, this is important stuff, man. Yeah. It needs to get out there. So thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Everybody have a good one. Take care.